For the next episode, Mr. Sharael Taha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for letting me be a part of this debate. Personally, Mr. Speaker, sir, this debate is a difficult one, and I'm sure many of colleagues here in the chamber will agree. During my block visits and conversation with the residents of Pasir Ris Punggol, cost of living, healthcare, and taking care of our increasingly aging population are issues that weigh heavily in everyone's minds. While we can all try to understand what's going on in the world today and explain the confluence of reasons for the global inflation or how the Sing dollar has strengthened to reduce the net impact on inflation, all these explanations fade away when at the end of the day, the price of a grocery bill is more expensive than what it was previously. Firstly, inflation is at an all-time high in Singapore. MAS expects headline inflation in 2022 to come between 5 to 6%, with core inflation to average between 3 to 4%. Prospects in 2023 do not look too rosy either. Economists expect inflation rates to ease, but will remain high at 3.5%. This comes with a forecasted slowdown in GDP growth. MTI narrowed its range for Singapore's GDP growth this year to 3 to 4%, from an earlier projection of 3 to 5%. This was in tandem with a worsening outlook for the global economy and stubbornly high inflation globally. In my conversations with Pasir Ris residents across the board, high inflation rates, cost of living, and healthcare were top on everyone's worry. In a public policy forum with youths at Pasir Ris East, our youths were concerned about the cost of living, affordability of healthcare for our seniors, and the load of supporting our rapidly aging population across a smaller base. One of them, Mr. Charles Chow, a young working professional, is concerned for the fact that 4 working adults are supporting 1 senior now, but by 2030, only 2 working adults will support 1 senior. What are the future financial challenges for working adults if this trend continues? He wonders how we can distribute the cost of providing affordable healthcare among a larger group of taxpayers. Last week, in a dialogue session with more than 70 members in the MM community through M-Cube Pasir Ris Punggol, the top 3 concerns they had for the community were rising costs, including the assistance for lower-income families, healthcare costs for our aging population, and education for students from lower-income families. Many of the residents in my ward are between the ages of 55 to 65. Their children have only recently begun working. Their homes will be paid for in the next few years. They have extensive work experience and they plan to retire soon. However, present inflation rates and rising costs of healthcare raise a real concern that their retirement account would prove insufficient. They worry that they would be a burden to their own children after retirement. We also have more middle-aged families. They are in their mid-30s and 40s with school-going kids and have relocated from the BTOs in Punggol or Sengkang to Pasir Ris to be closer to their parents who will retire soon. They're concerned about the rising cost of living for their family and the assistance available to care for the elderly parents. They feel sandwiched between their family and responsibility for their parents. In the last budget debate in February last year, DPM Wong highlighted that we almost tripled healthcare spending from 3.7 billion in 2030 to 11.3 billion in 2019. If our current healthcare spending continues to increase at a similar rate over the coming decade, we will spend around 27 billion by 2030. So how can we fund this increasing healthcare costs? Do we lessen spending on social development, security and external relations, or economic development? Or do we need to increase our revenue sources and redistribute resources more fairly to create a more inclusive society? We all agree that more must be done to keep healthcare affordable and provide greater assistance to lower-income families. We want more to be done without overburdening the lower and the middle income. We believe that those who have been blessed with more should give back more to society. So what are our options to provide the necessary healthcare support for a rapidly aging population while minimizing the impact on the majority of Singaporeans? In MOF's analysis of revenue and expenditure based on fiscal year 2021, About 70% of Singapore's revenue comes from NRIC, corporate tax, income tax, and goods and services tax. In his budget speech, DPM Wong mentioned on consideration of all the other types of taxes. Hence, I will not touch them here. However, I would like to provide a perspective from the industry on corporate tax, and in particular, the impact of base erosion profits sharing, BEPS 2.0, and if this can be a dependable alternative to raise the additional income we require to finance the increasing healthcare costs. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I would like to declare my interest. I lead strategy and program execution, including where to invest for a company that has a 30% global market share for the maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aerospace jet engines. In my previous role, I was also involved in making decisions of expansion plans for a global MNC. My portfolio includes setting up new manufacturing facilities and retrofitting factories that build advanced jet engines in UK, Germany, Canada, and Singapore. Under Pillar 1, 25% of the residual profits, defined as profits in excess of 10% of revenue, will be allocated away from the economic activities. Sorry, let me repeat that again. Will be allocated away from where the economic activities are conducted to where the markets are. Given Singapore's small domestic market in comparison to those around us, as well as our role as a regional hub for MNCs to do business from, there is an expected net outflow of tax revenue as tax is allocated away to the markets where the MNCs are serving. In his earlier speeches, DPM Wong mentioned the magnitude of fiscal impact will only be clear after internal negotiations have been concluded, and it has not. Pillar 2 of the multilateral consensus includes a global minimum effective tax rate of 15%. By increasing the minimum effective tax rate, we may collect more corporate tax and hence may just possibly increase tax revenue. However, this truly depends on how other governments and companies react. Mr. Speaker, the real question is, will there be a net increase in income from corporate tax such that gains in BEPS 2.0 alone can be sufficient to make up the hole left behind by not raising GST? Though collectively planned for in 2023, implementing BEPS 2.0 across 135 OECD countries will be difficult and uncertain. There is no clear timeline for implementation or how governments would react to it. Should we be the first to implement BEPS 2.0 by hiking corporate taxes willingly ahead of others and foregoing this competitive lever of our economy? Especially at a time where other countries are aggressively courting for more business investments to aid in their economic recovery. How will this impact our ability to attract investments? Should we put our country's competitiveness at risk since we do not know when and how other countries will implement the changes? Secondly, what will be the net income of BEPS 2.0? If we raise corporate taxes to the same level as other countries, or worse, ahead of other countries who are competing for the same investment, we will lose this competitive level for attracting foreign investments. Let me share with you a perspective from the industry now. With the current forecasted inflation rates, high interest rates on working capital, with the increase in payroll costs due to multiple reasons such as very tight labour market in Singapore, aspirations of our workforce to have higher pay each year, and factors like the PWM, because we want to do this. We want to pay our lower wage workers better. We want our workforce to be paid more each year, but remain competitive in the global market. And with the challenges and costs of talent acquisition in Singapore, managing supply chain volatility, the strength of Singapore dollar decreasing exports and service competitiveness, with the global increasing energy costs, and on top of that, we add on an additional headwind to the businesses, like the impending increase in carbon tax, because that is the right thing to do, not for the income of carbon tax, but to use carbon tax to encourage our businesses to adopt the right behavior to protect our environment. It is of no doubt that with all the headwinds I've mentioned, we will have to do something and spend on non-tax incentives to restore and enhance our business competitiveness to continue to attract foreign investments when we lose preferential tax rates as one of the competitive levers. At the very least, we will have to spend more on our workforce through programs like the career conversion programs to train, upskill, and attract more of our local talents to high-growth industries. We also have to spend more to form collaborations with research institutions like the $65 million joint lab program between A-Star, Rolls-Royce, and Sazell to drive productivity and develop novel technologies for the world. We'll also need to spend more on programs such as the Productivity Solutions Grant, Enterprise Development Grant, CTO as a Service, and many more grants to help our SMEs grow and develop capabilities that will instill investors' confidence that this tiny dot of ours, our Singapore, has the ecosystem that will enable the investments to grow and flourish, and most importantly, provide good jobs to our people, despite not having preferential tax rates. There is also the uncertainty of how businesses and governments will react when they lose this competitive lever too. The business world is neither simple nor static. Businesses and governments would react to this tax equalization through provisions of grants or corporate schemes to continue to attract investments whenever they lose preferential tax as a lever to attract investments. Businesses have a choice to make, and these are not binary choices of to invest or not to invest. Businesses can choose to slow down their growth, especially slow down their growth in Singapore, choose to not grow their operations in Singapore, diversify elsewhere, or worse, exit Singapore. Any of these decisions will hurt our workers and our economy, and then has a secondary effect of lowering our tax collection further. Hence, taking into consideration of the uncertainty of when it is to be implemented across all the OECD member states, uncertainty of the net income we can receive from it, uncertainty of how businesses and governments will react, how can we have the confidence to rely on this uncertain revenue source to finance something as certain and as critical as the healthcare needs of our aging population? The real question, Mr. Speaker, sir, will there be a net increase in income from corporate tax such that gains in BEPS 2.0 alone can be sufficient to make up the hole left behind by not raising GST? Is the implementation of BEPS 2.0 a viable and sustainable alternative to GST in paying for our increasing healthcare costs? Mr. Speaker, with all the uncertainties, the only thing that is certain is that if there is an increase in revenue from corporate taxes, there won't be a direct flow-through of revenue to income, as we will have to do something. Spend more to restore the lost competitive level. My worry, Mr. Speaker, sir, 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be above the age of 65 in 2030 is a certainty. 200,000 Singaporeans will be above the age of 80 by 2030 is a certainty. Our increasing healthcare costs is a certainty. How do we risk the expenditure of something so certain with an uncertain income source? Do we want to take the risk and jeopardize with the healthcare of our population? If corporate tax is not a suitable alternative at present, then how about GST? 60% of GST income comes from the top 20% income earners and foreigners spending in Singapore. Imagine that. When a tourist is having a meal at our restaurants or book for himself a 5-star hotel, if he spends $1,000 for a 3-day stay in one of our hotels, that additional tax income contributes to paying for our healthcare costs. As fellow parliamentary colleague Mr. Saktiandi mentioned earlier, which other taxation tool allows us to tax a non-residential population so effectively? According to the Singapore Tourism Analytics Network, 22.84 million tourists visited Singapore in pre-COVID 2019 and spent an average of more than $1,000 during their stay. Though they can claim tax refunds for goods that they purchase, the additional tax that they pay for services contribute to our tax income directly. Nevertheless, as much as GST allows us to earn more from visitors, we must do as much as we can to assist the middle and the lower income, such as through the assurance, the cost of living, and GST packages. The enhanced GST cash vouchers, GST USAVE rebate to offset utilities, SNCC rebate, MediSave top-up for seniors, and GST seniors bonus means that many Singaporeans pay GST below the headline rate. In fact, with the 9% GST and enhanced GST vouchers, 70% of the population will pay less than the current 7% GST, and the bottom 10% of Singapore households, including many retiree households, do not pay GST at all after the offset. Mr. Speaker, in Malay, please. Inflasi berada di paras tertinggi di Singapura. Dalam perbualan saya dengan penduduk Pasir Ris, termasuk masyarakat Melayu Islam, ramai penduduk menyuarakan kebimbangan mereka tentang kadar inflasi yang tinggi, kos sara hidup dan kos penjagaan keselamatan. Dalam sesi dialog dengan lebih daripada 70 anggota masyarakat melalui rangkaian M Kuasa 3 di Pasir Ris Punggol, 3 keprihatinan utama yang mereka hadapi adalah keperluan untuk menjaga warga emas, bantuan untuk keluarga berpendapatan rendah yang berhadapan dengan kos yang semakin meningkat, dan pendidikan untuk pelajar-pelajar daripada keluarga berpendapatan rendah. Saya faham dan akur bahawa isu kenaikan GST ini adalah rumit, lagi-lagi dengan kenaikan kos sara hidup. Namun hakikatnya adalah kenaikan GST ini akan disalurkan untuk menjaga dengan lebih baik warga emas kita yang semakin ramai bilangannya, selain memenuhi perbelanjaan jagaan kesihatan yang kian meningkat. Hampir 1 daripada 5 warga Singapura berumur 65 tahun ke atas, dan angka ini akan meningkat kepada kira-kira 1 dalam 4 menjelang tahun 2030. Antara 2012 dan 2022, perbelanjaan jagaan kesihatan telah meningkat daripada sekitar 3 bilion kepada 10 bilion setahun. Ini adalah kenaikan 3 kali ganda dalam tempoh 10 tahun. Malah, jumlah ini akan terus meningkat. Dan dijangka berjumlah 27 bilion setahun pada tahun 2030. Hampir 10 kali ganda berbanding dengan kos pada 2012. Oleh itu, kita perlu menyediakan aliran hasil sekarang untuk memastikan bahawa kita mempunyai sumber yang mencukupi. Tuan Speaker, soalannya, bagaimanakah pemerintah dapat menangani kesan kenaikan GST? Pertama, pihak pemerintah akan menyerap sepenuhnya GST ke atas pendidikan dan penjagaan kesihatan yang mendapat subsidi awam. Selain dari itu, pakej jaminan bermakna semua warga Singapura dewasa akan mendapat pembayaran tunai antara 700 dengan 1,600 dalam tempoh 5 tahun. Ini dapat mengimbangi sekurang-kurangnya 5 tahun perbelanjaan GST tambahan untuk kebanyakan isi rumah, dan 10 tahun bagi mereka yang tinggal di 1 hingga 3 bilik flat HDB. Skim voucher GST yang mempunyai 3 komponen: pembayaran tunai, tambah nilai Medisave dan rebate USAVE akan dipertingkatkan apabila kadar GST dinaikkan. Ini akan mengimbangi sepenuh GST bagi isi rumah pesara yang tinggal di flat HDB 1 hingga 3 bilik, mengimbangi dengan ketara GST untuk isi rumah pesara yang tinggal di flat HDB 4 hingga 5 bilik, dan mengimbangi kira-kira separuh daripada GST untuk isi rumah berpendapatan rendah tanpa warga emas. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, sir, the high levels of inflation coupled by the needs of our aging population is top of everyone's worry. It is of no doubt that as our population ages, our healthcare costs will increase and we must be prepared for it. We all believe in a fair and inclusive society where the lower income families should receive more assistance. DPM Lawrence has shared many alternative taxation tools considered in previous debates. With regards to corporate tax and the impact of BEPS 2.0 from an industry's perspective, when Singapore loses the competitive level of preferential tax rate, we will definitely have to do something and spend more on non-tax incentives to restore and enhance our business competitiveness. With all the uncertainties in implementing BEPS 2.0, the only thing certain is that even if there's an increase in revenue from corporate taxes, there won't be a direct flow-through of revenue to income. How do we then depend on something so uncertain to fund our increasing healthcare costs? With the right rebates, like the enhanced GST voucher, USAVE rebates, SNCC rebates, senior bonus, CDC vouchers, just to name a few, we can delay the impact of the GST increase to many of our residents. In fact, the lower 10% of the population do not pay GST at all. With that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the bill.